You know how people always tell you, location, location, location? Yeah, well, they conveniently leave out the fourth L. Lawyers, 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 because that's what a homeowners association really is. It's a legal protection racket designed to regulate the acceptable height of your petunias and apparently the emotional temperature of your roof. My name is Leo. I'm 34, work a soul-crushing but remote job in compliance. The irony is not lost on me. And 6 months ago, I finally bought a house in Pleasantville, Ohio. The name should have been a warning sign, right? Pleasantville. It sounds like a psychological experiment gone wrong, where everyone is forced to wear beige and smile constantly, lest they be dragged off by the color police. I thought I was moving up. Grass that didn't spontaneously combust, a 2-car garage, and that quiet suburban hum that lets you know things are fine. What I didn't realize was that I hadn't just bought a house. I'd signed a 600-page contract in blood with the PHOA, the Pleasantville Homeowners Association. And that contract was about to become my life's primary antagonist. The inciting incident didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with a passive-aggressive, certified, signature-required thud. It was a crisp, creamy envelope, the kind that screams, "I contain bad news and a mandatory fine," delivered by a USPS employee who looked genuinely apologetic. I opened it over a sad bowl of microwaved mac and cheese. The PHOA letterhead was embossed, naturally. It took 3 paragraphs of aggressive, lawyerly preamble to get to the point. But when it hit like a tiny, bureaucratic hammer. Subject: Notice of violation. Roofing material non-compliance. Dear Mr. Sterling, it has been observed by the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, that the roofing shingles currently installed on the property located at 4410 Briarwood Lane are in violation of community covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, Section 4.1.c. Specifically, your existing roof shingles are deemed non-compliant with color palette B, which mandates a semi-gloss, dove gray asphalt composite. The current hue is recorded as an unacceptable, non-spec tawny sandstone, effective immediately. Tawny sandstone. Tawny sandstone. I almost choked on my neon orange cheese powder. I swear I hadn't even looked at the roof before I bought the place. It was a roof. It was waterproof. It was fine. And now, some eagle-eyed tyrant with a spectrometer and way too much time on their hands had decided my roof was committing a felony against the color wheel. My initial reaction, the truly naive Leo reaction, was to laugh. Okay, so I'll go buy some dove gray outdoor paint, maybe a gallon, and spray it on. Problem solved. Easy fix. I quickly learned the error of my ways. I skimmed the CC&Rs, the actual 600-page horror novel, and found the corresponding subsection. It clarified, any alteration, including, but not limited to, staining, painting, or coating of roofing materials is strictly prohibited unless pre-approved by the ARC, and only if the resulting coloration achieves the mandated semi-gloss, dove gray asphalt composite finish. They were tightening the noose. They didn't just want me to change the color, they wanted me to replace the shingles. I checked the estimate. Replacing the roof on a house this size was a $12,000 to $15,000 headache. For gray, the exact shade of a rainy Tuesday morning. I was getting angry. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was a power play. I decided to take the reasonable route first. I requested a hearing at the next mandatory PHOA meeting. I was going to charm them. I was going to use logic. Bless my cotton socks, I really believed that. The meeting room was a sterile, brightly lit space that smelled faintly of old coffee and fear. The board sat at a long table, basking in the fluorescent glow of administrative superiority. At the center, looking like she was personally forged from reinforced concrete and entitlement, was Mrs. Eleanor Higgins, HOA president. She was mid-50s, possessed a tan the color of cheap varnish, and wore a pristine white power suit that probably had its own set of bylaws. I stood up when my name was called. I tried a light-hearted joke about confusing tawny sandstone with dove gray. Silence. A silence so thick you could carve it with an ice pick and still have enough left for an awkward pause. "Mr. Sterling," Mrs. Higgins began, her voice a low, gravelly rasp that implied a lifetime of crushing dissent. "The Pleasantville Homeowners Association is not in the business of humor. It is in the business of upholding community standards. Your violation is Class D, punishable by a $50 fine per week until corrected." $50? I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "But the roof was like this when I moved in. The previous owner—" "Irrelevant," she cut me off with the speed and precision of a well-oiled guillotine. "You own the house, you own the compliance. Furthermore, repainting is forbidden. You must submit a full replacement plan and material swatches within 30 days. If you fail to do so, we will contract the work ourselves, and you will be billed with a 25% administrative fee added." She stared me down, daring me to argue. I felt my blood pressure spiking. $12,000 for a cosmetic change that literally no one else cared about except this suburban despot and her clipboard army. "And Mr. Sterling," she continued, leaning forward, her eyes narrowing, "I must draw your attention to a critical clause, Section 7.2a. Any new installation must not deviate from accepted color palettes and must not produce a light emission visible from the street after 8 p.m. Do I make myself clear?" That last bit, delivered with such venom, was the straw that broke Leo's back. It wasn't about the shingles anymore. It was about her trying to dictate the existence of my house. I looked at her, saw the smug victory in her eyes, and something in me snapped. The compliance guy at the keyboard died, and the petty revolutionary was born. I left the meeting early, giving a curt nod and mumbling something about pursuing all available options. I drove home, not just angry, but simmering with a glorious, righteous, and expensive plan for revenge. I knew I couldn't beat them on color. I couldn't beat them on material type, if I used shingles, but the rule was hyper-specific. Asphalt composite, dove gray, light emission after 8 p.m., challenge accepted. I pulled out my laptop, took a deep breath, and typed the first thing that came to mind. HOA compliant non-shingles. The war was on. The next 3 days were a blur of caffeine, rage Googling, and the kind of deep dive into municipal code that usually only happens when you're facing tax fraud charges. My mission was simple. Find a roofing solution that wasn't technically a shingle, provided a function that was legally protected, like energy generation, and, most importantly, would give Mrs. Higgins a stroke. That's when I found them. The Lumisol PV integrated roofing tiles. They were sleek, modern, and expensive as sin. They were designed to look like high-end roofing slate, but each tile was a functional solar panel. They didn't even use the word shingle in their marketing. They called them photovoltaic architectural panels. Perfect. But here's where the malice, the pure, unadulterated suburban spite, kicked in. The company offered a ridiculously pricey custom feature, a proprietary, non-toxic, photoluminescent polymer coating that absorbed UV light all day and slowly released it at night. They offered it in 6 colors. Not a single one was semi-gloss dove gray. I went straight for the most offensive option, vibrant cyan. It was less roof and more Tron meets Chernobyl. I stared at the $40,000 price tag for the glowing tiles. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a nuclear option. This wasn't just a replacement. This was a statement. The thought of Mrs. Higgins watching my house glow like a rave from space was worth every penny of the interest I was about to pay. But before I committed financial harikari, I needed legal validation. I needed my parachute. I called my college roommate, Max, now a junior associate at a large, soul-sucking firm downtown. He specialized in property law, which basically meant he was an expert in the bizarre neuroses of rich people. Max, I need a deep dive into the legal definition of a shingle in Pleasantville, Ohio, circa 1997, I explained without preamble. Max sighed on the other end. Leo, are you being sued for the tawny sandstone violation yet? I'm being threatened with mandatory, financially punitive conformity. I found a loophole, Max, but it's a very expensive loophole, and I need you to confirm it's bomb-proof before I commit 40 grand. He groaned, hit me with the absurdity. I laid out the plan. The asphalt composite shingle rule, the vagueness of the energy installation section, and the forbidden light emission after 8 p.m. clause. Okay, let me pull up the Pleasantville PHOA Master Declaration, Max said, typing rapidly. The next 10 minutes were a comedy routine of Max reading absurd legalese. All right, Section 4.1.c. All residences shall maintain a roof comprised of Class A fire-rated asphalt composite shingles. Bingo, Leo. The key is asphalt composite shingles. If you are installing an entirely different material, say glass and crystalline silicone, it is not a shingle. It's an architectural panel. It doesn't fall under the shingle code. So I'm good on material? On material, yes. But here's the kicker. Section 7.2.a, the light emission 1. No permanent exterior lighting fixtures shall be installed or operated which produce a light emission visible from the street after 8 p.m., save for approved entryway illumination. Leo, are these panels going to glow? I cleared my throat. It's a low-lumen passive illumination system utilizing a proprietary photoluminescent regenerative polymer. Technically, it's not a fixture, it's the material itself. It's a passive safety feature. Does the asphalt rule apply to solar? Max paused. I could hear him shuffling papers. The section on energy installations is hilariously vague. It's from 1998. It basically says solar panels must be flush-mounted and not visible from the street. But they're designed to be the roof now, and the PHOA charter requires them to allow energy efficiency upgrades, provided they don't violate existing rules. Since your shingles don't fall under the existing shingle rule, and the light emission rule is about fixtures. Max laughed, a deep, booming laugh of pure legal schadenfreude. Leo, you madman. You have a case. It's expensive, it's petty, but it's technically compliant. The PHOA wrote specific rules for specific materials. By introducing a new technology they never anticipated, you render their entire code inert. You're exploiting the specificity of their own control. So I can do it? You can do it. Just be ready for the immediate restraining order. Get a good contractor who will work fast. I hung up, heart racing. My credit card limit was now officially a joke. The glow panels were ordered, vibrant cyan. Delivery in 3 weeks. This was happening. Now for the contractor. I needed someone reckless, talented, and slightly unhinged. Contractor Interview 1. Gary. Gary was gruff, smelled faintly of mildew and existential exhaustion, and looked like he'd been installing 3-tab asphalt shingles since the Nixon administration. I showed him the box of Lumisol panels. They were heavy, sleek, and clearly alien to him. "So these are solar?" Gary asked, squinting. "Yes, PV integrated," I confirmed. "And they replace the roof?" "Exactly." "And what's this finish? Is this a wrap?" I tried to be vague. "It's a specialty polymer coating, highly durable." Gary pulled a pair of reading glasses out of his shirt pocket, put them on, and peered closely at the material swatch. It was an intense, impossible blue. "And this is the color you want in Pleasantville, where everything is beige and regret?" "It's energy efficient, Gary. It reflects heat better," I lied smoothly. He shook his head, looking sad. "Son, I'm not putting glow paint on a solar panel. You're asking for a civil war. I've been in this town 40 years. I watched an HOA mandate that a man's bird bath be rotated 45 degrees clockwise. I'm not touching this. It's too much drama. Good luck." He left, smelling slightly more of despair than when he arrived. Then came Mikey. Mikey drove a beat-up Ford F-150 that was 80% duct tape and 20% rust. His company name, Mikey's Multi-Faceted Fixes, was crudely painted on the side. He was young, skinny, wearing a backward baseball cap, and looked like he needed the job, desperately. "All right, man, Lumisols. That's next level," Mikey whistled, genuinely impressed by the technology. "Tesla roof knockoff, but way cooler finish. Where did you get the cyan?" I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "It's a specialty photoluminescent upgrade. It gathers light." Mikey's eyes widened. He wasn't stupid. He instantly connected the dots. "Wait, you mean this roof is gonna glow? From the street? After 8 p.m.? It might," I admitted, trying to look innocent. "It's a passive emission, like phosphorescence. It's not a fixture." Mikey leaned back against my porch railing and burst out laughing. It was a beautiful, honest sound. "You're doing this to stick it to the HOA, aren't you? That old dragon, Mrs. Higgins?" "I am funding my own rebellion," I confirmed. "I need someone who can work fast, get it done in 3 days, and sign an NDA saying they only installed standard slate-style PV panels. And I need someone who won't blink when the lady with the tanning addiction starts taking photos." 3 days, man, that's tight. That's a 7-man crew and 17-hour days. And that glow finish is fragile. We gotta be careful. He paused, calculating. "I usually charge $20 for a full tear-off and PV install. But for a job this spicy, for the sheer fun of watching Mrs. Higgins spontaneously combust, I want $30,000 cash." I blinked. It was steep, but this was more than a roof. It was a performance art piece. 30 grand, done. But I need you to agree to one thing. We install the glow tiles last, and the moment you're done, you pack up and disappear. I need to be here alone for the reveal." Mikey grinned, extending a hand. His handshake was surprisingly firm. "Deal, Mr. Sterling. You, my man, are an American hero. We start Monday. May the PHOA be ever in your favor." With the rogue contractor secured and the tiles on their way, the adrenaline of commitment replaced the panic of debt. I was ready to ruin my life, one glowing shingle at a time. The demolition date was set. Let the battle commence. The 3 weeks leading up to the install felt like the calm before a very specific, hyperlocal hurricane. The Lumisol tiles arrived in a massive crate, looking less like roofing material and more like something the military uses to clad stealth bombers. I had them stored in my garage, draped under an industrial tarp, like a very expensive, blue-tinged secret. Monday morning, the crew descended. Mikey, true to his word, showed up with 6 guys, 3 dumpsters, and a whole lot of aggressive energy. They started the tear-off at 6:30 a.m., and the neighborhood, which normally only registered sound from lawnmowers and the distant polite weeping of children, erupted. The PHOA counteroffensive was immediate and glorious. By 8:00 a.m., Mrs. Higgins was parked directly across the street in her pristine white Cadillac Escalade, which was idling like a caged predator. She wasn't subtle. She was using a professional-grade Canon camera with a telephoto lens, snapping pictures of every single nail, every discarded shingle, and every face of Mikey's crew. Mikey, who was ripping off the old tawny sandstone with what I can only describe as joyful savagery, just yelled, "Say cheese, Eleanor! You look tense, babe!" I walked out to my mailbox, affecting a calm that was pure fiction, and saw her glare. It was laser-focused and capable of cutting through steel. "Mr. Sterling," she hissed, rolling down her window just enough for her voice to escape, "I demand to see the detailed specifications for the materials being installed." "Good morning, Mrs. Higgins," I replied, forcing a smile that felt like I was wearing a dental retainer made of spite. "It's a beautiful day for construction, isn't it? And certainly I'd be happy to. As per my legal counsel's recommendation, all documentation was already delivered to the PHOA office via certified courier. It's on the flash drive enclosed." I had indeed sent her the documentation, a 100-page, technically dense PDF filled with incomprehensible engineering diagrams, material safety data sheets, and a lengthy appendix on the advanced quantum efficiency of crystalline silicon and its thermal regulation properties. I made sure the word glow was nowhere, but the words photosensitive regenerative material were used 17 times. She sputtered, clearly realizing she hadn't bothered to read the 100-page document. "That documentation is unacceptable. It fails to specify the color palette adherence. I demand the physical swatches for comparison with the community matrix." "Mrs. Higgins, the material is a Level 3 photovoltaic integrated system," I explained, leaning against the side of her car and speaking slowly, like she was a very dim child. "It falls under the energy installation exemption, not the asphalt composite shingle mandate. Its color is a function of its light absorption spectrum, which is optimized for energy conversion, a federally encouraged project. Attempting to impede this construction may be deemed interference with a clean energy initiative, which, I'd hate to inform you, is a potential violation of the—" I trailed off, letting the implied threat hang in the air. Her eyes were burning holes in me, but the sheer weight of the technical jargon stopped her dead. She slammed her window up and drove off, tires squealing slightly. Victory won on technical merit. But she didn't give up. The next morning, a bright orange "Stop Work Order" sign was affixed to my front door. It was signed by Mrs. Higgins, claiming unauthorized deviation from approved material and color palette. Mikey laughed when I showed it to him. "That's a civil document, man. It's not a city permit." She literally printed that on her HP Envy. "Can we ignore it?" I asked, suddenly nervous. "We can, but let's be smart. We'll work on the interior wiring today, running the conduits and batteries. That's all internal and completely outside PHOA jurisdiction. By tomorrow, we'll start placing the tiles. By then, it will be too late for her to get a legitimate injunction from the county zoning board. They work slow. We work fast." The installation was a race against bureaucracy. The tension was immense, but the work was incredible. The roof structure was entirely replaced with the sleek, dark panels. By 4 p.m. on day 3, only a few remaining tiles needed to be placed near the ridge vent. That's when the real fun started. I was inside, coordinating the final battery bank placement, when Mikey yelled from the roof. "Leo, we got visitors! Looks like official HOA backup." I looked out the window. Sure enough, Mrs. Higgins was back. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her, pulled over to the side of the road, were 2 police cruisers. My stomach dropped. She had escalated to the state level. I walked out, wiping dust off my hands, and met them halfway across the lawn. The 2 officers looked profoundly unhappy to be there. One was an older guy, mid-50s, with a tired mustache and weary eyes that had clearly seen too much. This was Officer Miller. The other was a younger officer, maybe 25, impossibly neat with an unearned air of rigid authority. Officer Johnson. "Afternoon, gentlemen," I said, trying to sound as casual as if I was discussing the weather, not my impending arrest for shingle violations. Officer Miller held a hand up to shield his eyes from the afternoon sun. He looked at the roof, then at me, then across the street at Mrs. Higgins, who was beaming with vindication. "Mr. Sterling, we received a call regarding suspicious construction, potential zoning violations, and reckless endangerment of community aesthetic standards." He read the last bit directly from his notepad, with a slight shake of his head. "That would be Mrs. Higgins, officer," I said politely. "She's taken a keen interest in my residential energy upgrade project." Mrs. Higgins strutted forward, pointing, a manicured finger at the unfinished roof. "Officers, I filed an official stop work order. He is defying a mandate to replace his non-compliant tawny sandstone shingles. He is instead installing these black rectangles that are clearly out of code. This is an immediate threat to property values." Officer Johnson, the rookie, stepped forward stiffly. "Sir, can you produce the permits for the installation?" "Absolutely, officer," I said, handing him a perfectly organized folder containing the county building permit, the electrical permit, and the official signed contract with Mikey, listing the materials as PV architectural panels. "As you can see, all county requirements are met. The work is fully permitted, inspected, and bonded." Officer Miller took the folder and flipped through it slowly, ignoring Mrs. Higgins's increasingly frantic commentary about the shade of gray being a moral failure. "Mrs. Higgins," Officer Miller said finally, looking directly at the HOA president. "The materials listed here are photovoltaic panels. That is a solar installation, not an asphalt shingle. This appears to be a civil matter related to your HOA covenants, not a police matter related to city code or zoning." "But the color, officer, the aesthetic. This house will look like a—" She struggled for the right insult. "A rave," I interjected smoothly. "Officer Miller, I believe Mrs. Higgins is referring to the fact that the PHOA bylaws contain a specific definition for asphalt composite shingles, which these are not. They are solar panels, a matter of federally encouraged clean energy. The PHOA is attempting to illegally interfere with a licensed, permitted energy project based on an outdated definition of a roofing material." I looked at Mrs. Higgins and gave her a smile that was 90% teeth. "I'd hate for you to accidentally violate any federal energy mandates by impeding the final stage of installation, Mrs. Higgins. I've already consulted counsel." The cops looked at each other. Officer Miller pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, we are not the HOA police. We enforce city and state law. If this is a covenant violation, you need to file an injunction in civil court, not call 911. He paused, looking at my house, then back at Mrs. Higgins. "I'm sure Mr. Sterling will ensure the final result is unobtrusive." He gave me a look that wasn't entirely disapproving. It was almost sympathetic. He lowered his voice. "Just make sure it doesn't bother the neighbors, Mr. Sterling. Seriously, we have actual crimes to investigate." Officer Johnson, clearly unhappy that the forces of law and order were being thwarted by a technicality, still looked ready to issue a citation for my aggressive shade of green grass. But he reluctantly followed Miller back to the cruiser. As Officer Miller climbed into his car, he paused, gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible wink, and drove off. Mrs. Higgins stood alone on my front lawn, her face a mask of purple-tinged fury. She looked like she was about to explode into a cloud of angry beige dust. She knew she had lost the bureaucratic battle. The roof was going on. "You haven't won, Mr. Sterling," she whispered, her voice dangerously low. "You have only delayed the inevitable. I will find a violation." "I look forward to it, Mrs. Higgins," I replied cheerfully, turning toward my house. "Now, if you'll excuse me, my photovoltaic architectural panels need finishing before dark." I watched her drive away, defeated. Mikey gave me a thumbs up from the roof. "That was epic, Leo. You just weaponized the law against the very people who wrote it." "It's called compliance, Mikey. You just have to be more compliant than your enemy." The final tiles, the glowing ones, were ready to go in. The sun was starting its slow descent, painting the Ohio sky in shades of orange and pink. The glow was coming. And Mrs. Higgins had just given me a very specific countdown. The light emission rule starts at 8 p.m. We had less than 2 hours. The rush was manic. Mikey and his 2 most agile guys were flying across the roof, carefully snapping the cyan-coated PV tiles into place. These were the high-cost, high-spite tiles that contained the special polymer. These were the tiles that would bathe Pleasantville in the light of my glorious $50,000 architectural rebellion. I was downstairs, double-checking the wiring connections to the inverter and battery bank, ensuring maximum output. Not just for the power grid, but for the glow. The more sunlight these things absorbed in the last hour, the brighter the show would be. The last tile was a tight fit. I heard the satisfying thunk as it locked into the frame. Mikey let out a triumphant yell. "We are gold, Leo! Or blue! The roof is closed! Let the sun go down!" I rushed outside. The crew was already packing up their tools, moving with incredible speed. I handed Mikey his final payment in a thick envelope. "You're a genius, man. Truly," I told him, genuinely grateful. "You're the lunatic with the vision, Leo," he corrected, tucking the envelope into his toolbox. "I'm just the guy who executes the insanity. Now, I gotta go. I need to be 5 blocks away for 8:01 p.m. Don't worry, I'll take pictures." He jumped into his truck, gave a final wave, and sped down the street, disappearing just as the sun dipped behind the western tree line. I was alone. The house was quiet. The stage was set. The silence was deafening. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a major cosmic event, or maybe just a strongly worded email. I walked out to the middle of my freshly mown lawn and looked up. The sky was fading from burnt orange to a deep, velvety indigo. The roof itself, during the day, was just a uniform, sleek, dark blue-black, certainly out of code, but not actively offensive. It was modern, it was clean, it was, dare I say, almost handsome. But the light was fading fast. I pulled out my phone. It was 7:55 p.m. 5 minutes until the 8 p.m. threshold of HOA scrutiny. The moment Mrs. Higgins' clause about light emission visible from the street took effect. I paced, my heart doing a frenetic samba against my ribs. Was this the stupidest thing I'd ever done? $40,000 of debt, an injunction looming, and potential permanent alienation from my entire neighborhood, all for a point of bureaucratic principle and a really cool glow? Yes. Yes, it was. And it was glorious. 7:58 p.m. Streetlights began to flicker on down the block. The last golden hour light vanished. Everything was turning gray. The dove-gray asphalt composite shingles of my neighbors suddenly looked exactly like what they were: boring, predictable, and compliant. 7:59 p.m. I could hear cars idling slowly past my house, presumably driven by curious neighbors who had been tracking the Mikey's multifaceted fixes truck all day. They were anticipating a reveal. They just didn't know what kind. 8 o'clock p.m. The line had been crossed. Nothing happened. My stomach sank. Oh God. Had I been scammed? Had the vibrant cyan photoluminescent polymer just been a fancy, expensive paint? Had the sun not been strong enough? I was preparing my acceptance of defeat, a painful, humiliating surrender to the forces of beige mediocrity. Then, slowly, subtly, it began. It wasn't a flash. It wasn't a sudden, harsh floodlight. It was a deep, impossible cyan. It started near the ridge, a faint, ethereal haze, like someone had spilled a galaxy on my roof. The color deepened, spreading across the PV panels, panel by panel. It was a beautiful, otherworldly blue-green, vibrating with stored solar energy. It wasn't just the roof. The glow was so intense that it cast a soft, luminescent halo around the entire perimeter of the house. It was bright enough to read by. It was the color of liquid nitrogen mixed with pure spite. My house looked like a landing beacon for friendly extraterrestrials. It was a monument to nonconformity. It was, unequivocally, the most spectacular roof in the history of Pleasantville. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half hysterical sob. I stood there, bathed in the strange, cool cyan light of my own rebellion. The first major reaction was vehicular. A sedan driving down Briarwood Lane literally slowed to a stop. The driver and passenger craned their necks, mouths open, before the car behind them honked angrily. Next came the foot traffic. A woman who was jogging, the kind of neighbor who takes her fitness very seriously, stopped dead in her tracks in front of my driveway. She pulled out her phone, not to call the PHOA, but to take a picture. She looked up at me, standing on my lawn like the proprietor of a glow stick factory, and just gave me a confused, slightly awestruck shrug. "Is that art?" she called out. I smiled broadly. "It's a cutting-edge passive illumination safety feature, ma'am. It also generates power. You can see it from space." "Huh," she said, looking impressed, and jogged on, presumably with new fuel for her neighborhood gossip. Then, the white whale arrived. Mrs. Higgins's Escalade came idling down the street. She must have seen the light from miles away, probably thinking it was a massive transformer explosion. She pulled up directly across the street and stopped. She killed the engine. She didn't get out immediately. She just sat there, a dark silhouette framed against the blinding, beautiful cyan of my roof. I could feel her fury radiating across the asphalt. Finally, she opened the door and slowly, deliberately, stepped out. She was wearing a matching dove-gray tracksuit, because of course she was. She walked to the curb, her hands clasped so tightly I imagined her knuckles were bone-white. She looked at the roof. She looked at the roof's reflection in my front window. She looked at the faint cyan glow cast upon her own face. "Mr. Sterling!" Her voice was a strained shriek, barely above a whisper. "What is that?" "It's the Lumisol PV system, Mrs. Higgins," I replied, standing tall on my lawn. "Fully permitted, fully compliant with energy codes. Isn't it magnificent? It's absorbing the residual light from the sun, converting it to energy, and releasing the benign thermal byproduct in a low-lumen passive light wave." She found her copy of the bylaws on her phone and started scrolling, jabbing at the screen. Section 7.2 Any new installation must not deviate from accepted color palettes and must not produce a light emission visible from the street after 8 p.m. You have violated the light emission clause. "I don't believe so, Mrs. Higgins," I said, strolling closer to the curb. "The clause you cite refers to lighting fixtures. I have installed 0 lighting fixtures. I have installed photovoltaic architectural panels. The glow is a function of the material itself, not an operable lighting system. It is inherent to the material's composition, like a pearl's luster or your car's reflection." She struggled to find the words. "It is visible. It is emitting light. It is a public nuisance." "A public safety feature, Mrs. Higgins. Drivers can see my house from a quarter-mile away. It's a low-lumen, passive glow that poses no risk of glare, unlike a spotlight or a neon sign, which the clause was written to prevent. I would argue that not having this feature could be considered negligence in modern residential safety." She was defeated, and she knew it. The anger turned to desperation. She started shouting at the roof itself. "I will have it removed. I will call the county. You will be fined into oblivion." I checked my watch. 8:15 p.m. Show was still going strong. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, lowering my voice and keeping my tone impeccably polite, "I would suggest you return home and review the HOA charter, specifically the section requiring the board to support all viable energy-efficient upgrades. Interfering with a clean energy project is a costly legal battle, and I am prepared to fight it." She gave me one final, hate-filled glare that promised eternal vengeance. She walked back to her Cadillac, threw herself inside, and sped away, the tires actually squealing in a dramatic asphalt-based protest. I won! I absolutely won the battle of the glowing roof. I stood there for another 20 minutes, just basking in the cyan light. It was cold, beautiful, and utterly defiant. My neighbors kept walking by, some shaking their heads, others giving me a quiet thumbs up. I became, instantly, the symbol of low-grade, suburban anarchy. I was the guy who fought the PHOA with a $40,000 laser light show. This was more than a roof. It was freedom. It was expensive, high-interest freedom, but freedom nonetheless. The next morning, the sky was a neutral, non-offensive blue, and the Lumisols were back to their sleek, dark, silent selves. It was business as usual, except for the massive battery bank humming softly in my garage and the dozens of pictures of my glowing house already circulating on the neighborhood Facebook page, half labeled Architectural Nightmare and the other half labeled Genius. The predictable response came at noon. A certified letter from the PHOA's lawyers demanding immediate cessation of the luminous architectural deviation and threatening a permanent injunction. I forwarded it instantly to Max. "Max, tell me you have the silver bullet." "I have the nuclear missile, Leo," he replied dryly. "I filed an emergency motion for declaratory judgment this morning with the county court. We are asking the judge to declare that A, photovoltaic architectural panels are not asphalt composite shingles, and therefore the PHOA lacks jurisdiction over the material color, and B, the passive low-lumen emission is not a lighting fixture as defined in their bylaws and is protected under the Energy Efficiency Clause." What are the odds? 100%. Their bylaws are specific, and specificity is the enemy of all-encompassing power. They screwed up by not writing a new rule for non-traditional roofing materials. The judge will side with clean energy and good law. I also included a copy of the police report from Officer Miller, noting that they deemed it a civil matter related only to HOA covenants. That was gold. 3 days later, the hearing was held via Zoom. I watched Max destroy Mrs. Higgins' high-priced downtown lawyer. It wasn't even close. The lawyer kept trying to appeal to the spirit of the law, and Max just kept reading the literal definitions from the PHOA's own 1997 charter. The judge, bless his heart, sighed, rubbed his temples, and ruled decisively. The court finds that the PHOA covenants, as written, do not contemplate integrated photovoltaic roofing systems. The petitioner, Mr. Sterling, is in compliance with all relevant county permits. Furthermore, the light emission, while aesthetically unique, does not meet the legal definition of an operable lighting fixture and appears to be a passive function of an exempted energy system. The PHOA's attempt to use outdated, overly specific covenants to prohibit state-of-the-art energy efficiency is denied. The motion for injunction is dismissed. I had won. The legal, technical, bureaucratic war was over. I was free to glow. The neighborhood slowly adjusted. Mrs. Higgins retired from the PHOA board 3 weeks later, citing irreconcilable differences with the current state of modern architectural morality. I became a minor local legend, the guy who fought the HOA and won with a glowing roof. Neighbors who previously wouldn't make eye contact now stopped to chat, asking for advice on solar financing, and occasionally, secretly, where to get a non-offensive, slightly less potent glow shingle. But the victory was bittersweet. I was $50,000 in debt, and my house looked like a futuristic casino. However, the Lumi Sol panels were good. Really startlingly good. Because I lived in Ohio and the power grid was constantly overtaxed, I was generating a massive amount of excess energy. At the end of the first month, I got a check from the power company. A large one. I was getting paid to have a glowing roof. The petty, spiteful rebellion had become a passive income stream. I thought I was finally in the clear. I thought I had achieved peace. Then last Tuesday, I got another letter. Same creamy paper, new PHOA board, new regime, same tyranny. Subject: Notice of violation. External utility apparatus non-compliance. Dear Mr. Sterling, it has been observed by the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, that the external utility meter box affixed to the southwest corner of your residence is visually prominent and is in violation of community covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CCNRs, Section 6.4. which mandates all external utility apparatus must be fully screened from street view using an approved opaque architectural barrier, color palette D, forest green or woodland brown. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. The roof glows, the money rolls in, and the PHOA is officially my nemesis for life. I walked outside, looked at my boring gray power meter, and then looked up at my roof, which was currently soaking up the Ohio sun, ready to explode in cyan glory at 8 p.m. The principle, however, remained. I cannot screen the meter with a simple box. That would be boring. I cannot use forest green or woodland brown. I'm Leo Sterling, the guy who owns the Glow House. I have to escalate. I have to innovate. I went straight to my laptop. The debt is high, but the solar payments are flowing, and the spite tank is full. I'm going to need a rogue welding contractor next. So, it begins again, I muttered, typing my next search query. The roof glows, the money rolls in, and the PHOA is officially my nemesis for life. But hey, at least I finally found a shade of gray they can't complain about, the kind that glows with pure, glorious spite. Onto the meter box, I guess. Wish me luck. I'm going to need it.